Hey everyone, welcome to episode 4 of my Baldur's Gate 3 report cards. I want to start by saying thank you for all the positive reception of the first few episodes. I've gotten a lot of kind comments and good discussions, and I wanted to thank you all for that. Today, we're going to be jumping back into some of the weaker spells after the excitement of Cloud of Daggers, with Barkskin and Magic Weapon, 2 day-long concentration buffs. And let's get started with Barkskin. Barkskin. Touch a willing creature to toughen its skin and increase its armor class up to 16. This costs an action, your spell slot, and your concentration. It has no upcasting benefit. It is learned by druids, nature clerics, and rangers. So Barkskin pretty plainly just sets your AC to 16 if it would otherwise be lower. And also pretty plainly, 16 AC is too low. Once you get proficient at building characters, you're really not going to see ACs lower than 16, so you just don't get any value out of the spell. In general, in the early game, your characters are going to wear robes, medium armor, or heavy armor. Heavy armor should just have a base AC of 16 or more. Medium armor should have 14 or more, and you should have 14 dex on all your characters, so you have 16 AC there. Robes with mage armor have 13 base AC, and then if you have 14 dex, you get 15 AC. The way I build my spellcasters is usually with 16 dex, so they'll have 16 AC already as well. The only improvement you can get in the early game is over light armor, but anyone that uses light armor can just use robes with mage armor instead, which is a level 1 spell that doesn't cost your concentration. So 16 AC just isn't good enough, and on top of that, this is a concentration spell. And man, it is difficult to keep your concentration up for a full day. You can take just any stray damage and you have the chance of losing your spell. You can try to build around keeping concentration up, but that's pretty difficult to do in the early game, which is the only time you might get really any value out of this spell, and it's also not worth it for such a low buff. It's really tough, and there's a huge opportunity cost as well. Druids especially have Spike Growth and Moonbeam, which are 2 really good concentration spells that take level 2 spell slots. So why would you want to use your concentration on Barkskin? It does have, I'd say, 2 use cases though. They're both pretty weak, but they are real. And the first is again with druids. This works in wild shape. So you can cast this on yourself and then wild shape and have 16 AC. This is a fairly noticeable buff for a lot of forms, but it's still quite weak, honestly. Owlbear form only gets +1 AC. Spider form only gets +2. And really only the weaker wild shapes get big buffs, the ones you wouldn't want to use anyways. The other use case for Barkskin, and I think this is maybe a little stronger but definitely rarer, is you can use this on like NPC allies or even summons. It is difficult to buff up your summons AC, and this is a way you can do it. I don't think it's worth the cost, but that is a real use case. And you can also use this on friendly NPCs that might put themselves into danger that have low ACs. The spell can do that. I wouldn't recommend using it for that, but it is a use case, and I think that's really the best you can get out of this one. So as we get into the grades, I think it should come as no surprise that it's going to be really low all around. At the top here, I have Fs for at base level at any point in the game. It's even worse as you get later into the game, because once you're in like late Act 1, early Act 2, you really should not have any characters that need this buff. In the early game, maybe very early on, you would have some characters that can use this to get up to 16 AC, but once you get your builds online, there really is no use for this. The middle section is mostly going to be Fs all around. Just again, this spell is just way too weak. I give it a little bonus in specificity with the D because of the use case of using it on summons or NPC allies. I think that's a real use case, not a very good one, but it exists for this spell. I also gave it a little bonus in class synergy because of the druid use case. Again, I don't think it's worth it. Your concentration is such a huge resource that you don't want to give up, but as a druid, you can use this to buff up your wild shapes. Overall, this spell has to be an F. I think there's really no other rating for this. Maybe if you're an avid druid player and you swear by using this for your wild shapes, let me know in the comments, but I can't imagine myself moving this higher than an F. Now let's move on to Magic Weapon. Magic Weapon. Infuse a weapon with arcane energy. The weapon becomes magical, receiving a +1 bonus to attack rolls and damage rolls. This is another action level 2 spell slot and concentration spell. It does have some upcasting benefit. If you use a 4th or 5th level spell, you get a +2 bonus, and a 6th level spell gets you a +3 bonus. This one is learned by Wizards, War Clerics, Paladins, Arcane Tricksters, and Eldritch Knights. And let's get into the grades. So how strong is this buff? Well, a +1 to hit is about +5% chance to hit. This is low. It's quite low, but it is meaningful. Over the course of a long adventuring day with a lot of attacks, this will make a difference. Intuitively, it should make sense that the more attacks you make, the stronger this buff is. So classes like Hunter Rangers, Tiger Barbarians, Swords Bards, Fighters, they can get good value out of this because they make a lot of attacks per turn. This spell really is a get value over time spell. If you use it for just one encounter, it's not going to get you much, but when you have these high attack number classes and you use this over a long period of time, you will get value. Something of note is that it upcasts pretty uniquely. It buffs both the on-hit and damage, which is nice because if you think of this as a damage spell that does 1 damage per attack, most damage spells, when you upcast them, they just get more damage. But this one gets you more damage and more chance to hit, which is nice. The issue, though, is that you need to upcast 2 spell slots to get this bonus. So really, it's each level of upcasting corresponds to 1 bonus. So it's not how it actually works, but it's like going from 2 to 3 gets you the +1 on hit, and then going from 3 to 4 gets you the +1 on damage. So even though I think on the surface, it seems nice that it buffs both the on hit and damage, it actually doesn't upcast that well. But the first key issue with the spell is the same as Barkskin. It is a day-long concentration buff. And man, it is difficult to keep concentration up for a full day. Differently from Barkskin, I think this spell does get better later into the game because of the lower opportunity cost and increased number of attacks that will be made. So it does get a bit easier to keep concentration up as you get stronger, but it is still difficult. But you don't really want to use your concentration for a full day, especially in the late game when you have high-level, strong concentration spells. The other key issue, and I think this really does hold it back, is I think it synergizes pretty poorly with its classes and obviously the high opportunity cost. Paladins will need to make lots of concentration checks, and this spell competes with Smite, so they're not going to cast it. Wizards and War Clerics can't afford to use their concentration on this for a day because they have such great spells. Arcane Tricksters are terrible, but maybe they could use this as like a buffing spell for allies. But it's a really bad self-cast, and they can only cast it at level 2. I think Eldritch Knights are like the only real user of this spell because they don't have many level 2 spell slot options since their modifier is so low. And they do make a lot of attacks per turn, but even in this case, it's difficult to keep the concentration up, it can't be upcast, and it is competing with a few strong spells. And that's it. No other classes get this. I kind of wish Rangers got it, because maybe like a ranged Hunter Ranger could get good value, and they could stay safe at range to avoid losing their concentration. But even they couldn't upcast it, and you lose out on your concentration. So, man, even then, I don't know if it would make it good. But as is, the classes that do get Magic Weapon just can't use it well. Now, let's jump into the grades themselves. There's a little bit of dissonance here with the grades being quite varied, but I do think they should all make sense. So, I've given it an F at base level early game, and a D for at base level mid and late game. Like I mentioned earlier, I think this spell gets better as you progress in the game because there's a lower opportunity cost, and you can make more attacks per turn, so it becomes stronger. But in the early game, it's really not worth your spell slot. I don't think it is in the late game either, but it is better. Upcasting, I gave it a C. I like the buff it to both on hit and damage, but the fact that you need to use 2 spell slots to get that bonus is really rough. The middle section is also pretty varied. Superiority, I gave it a C, uniqueness a C, and versatility a B. This buff is not very strong numerically, and that's why superiority is a C, but it is just generally good. +1 to hit, +1 damage, that's nice to have. So, and it's gonna, if you can keep it up for a full day, you're gonna get good use out of it over a long period of time in pretty much every encounter you do. So that's why versatility has somewhat high grade. Uniqueness and superiority gets C's. The unique part about this is that most buffing spells either buff your hit chance or your damage, and this one does both, which is nice. It's a little bit weaker with just a flat +1 instead of like a D4, but that is a good buff to have. So I gave it a little credit there with the C. The real kicker though, the price. It's another F. You just can't afford to use your concentration on this for a full day. It's really rough. It's not worth it. It's difficult to keep up, and I think this spell it's really hard to find a place where you can cast it because of the high cost of it. I gave it some bonuses here. Well, I gave it one bonus and one, I guess, negation here in the special categories. Class Synergy gets an F. Like I talked about before, I think most of the classes that get it really can't cast it, which holds the spell back. Specific builds, I gave a little bonus with a C. The reason I did this is I think specific classes could get good use out of this. If you're making a lot of attacks per turn, it's a real bonus, right? It doesn't feel like a lot because it's only +1, but over the course of a long encounter and adventuring day, you can get a lot of extra hits, a lot of extra damage from this spell. It's really not worth it, but I do think for specific builds, you can't deny that it's a good buff. Overall, I think this just has to be an F. You know, the grades are quite varied. I think if we averaged this, it would be like a high D or low C, but man, the cost is just too high. You can't justify using your concentration for a full day on any spell, let alone one that is, you know, a decent buff, but not very strong. Just overall, meh. Now, let's jump into the tier list itself and put these in there. So these are both going to be an F. I think Magic Weapon is way better than Barkskin. I think it gives you a decent buff, right? Like we talked about. The issue is just the cost. Barkskin, the buff itself isn't even worth it. I would, if Magic Weapon were not a concentration spell, I'd cast it pretty much every day. Barkskin, if it weren't a concentration spell, I don't know if I'd ever cast it. Maybe like once or twice in a playthrough. So that's why it is lower than Magic Weapon, but they are both going to be an F tier. Well, thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know what you think in the comments and what spells you would like to see next. Thank you.